So for the first step that I recommend, and this is something that if anyone were to ask me the best tip to do, first and foremost, is to focus on beating the game first. It might seem a little bit obvious. There's a lot of features in the game that are locked behind actually beating the game so that you can't do them, that actually make your progressing your character really, really easy. Now, there's also a lot of other features that probably about 50% of them that you can actually do right now. The problem is that when you try to do them without beating the game, it's going to be very difficult and you're going to have to spend a long time researching, trying to figure out how things work, how to understand it and all that. And it's not going to make any sense to you whatsoever. As opposed to if you just simply play through the story, it'll be introduced to you and then you'll have a hell of a lot easier of time. Plus, if you actually do the features that the story mode introduces you to, they're very lucrative in giving you the tools for you to succeed into doing other things about the game that, for the purposes of spoilers, I won't tell you because it's a beginner's video. It's supposed to be directed towards that kind of a thing. If you really can't be bothered to do the story and whatnot, which you don't have to, but it's strongly advised, we're going to move on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to unlock the Exocraft summoning platforms as soon as possible. You can do this by activating the space anomaly. These Exocrafts that you can actually use, you can store items in them, and they actually function as basically another form of storage. Now, you can't upgrade the storage, unfortunately. Maybe in a later date. Hello Games, if you're watching this, please make it so that you can actually upgrade the storage of these Exocrafts. Each of the different types of Exocrafts have more or less cargo space that you can put all your items into. For instance, the Colossus Exocraft can actually hoard a lot of items in there, especially if you're playing on normal difficulty, which most of the player base is. It's 9,999 of one particular item. At early game, they're completely busted. They're insane. They're extremely useful. And then plus the recipe to unlock these different Exocrafts, they don't actually require too much of them, and you can actually build them pretty easily, which will also segue into my third tip that I recommend, is to rush to get the launch auto charger first before anything else, because this will give you the ability to recharge your thrusters whenever you're not using your starship. And if you're just exploring it out and about, it's extremely useful. And on top of that, what you also want to also get is the economy scanner. If you're ever in a pickle and you're exploring and you kind of trap yourself in a hole or what have you, whatever the heck happens, and you just simply need to summon your ship and get out of dodge, you can actually do such because the thrusters have been constantly recharging as you were doing some exploring. So it's incredibly useful. One of the ingredients that's required to make this is the wiring looms. The wiring looms is a unique kind of circumstance in this game. You probably don't have a lot of money. In the early game, one of the best investments that you can make, one of the best among many others that you could possibly make, is to buy wiring looms as soon as possible. Stack up on these things like 80 at a time at all times. Put them somewhere safe and then just carry them on you at all times, because they're the only ingredient that cannot be crafted, but it's incredibly useful to have, and it's used for virtually every single upgrade module in the game. You can find them very easily, and where you find them is through the pilot vendors on space stations, from the galactic trade terminals, whether or not that's from the space stations themselves have the galactic trade terminal. Also different trade outposts that you can find on planets, which I'll tell you how to do it to find those. But if you do actually end up finding them by mistake through exploration and whatnot, buy the wiring looms from them too as well. Different encounters when you're warping in space, you can actually get into different NPC interactions where a ship will kind of fly in front of you, offering you sell you different things. For a weapon for your starship, get the starship weaponry, because you can actually fend off a bunch of pirates, which, by the way, you will be attacked in this game eventually at some point. It's not really necessarily a spoiler. You probably even already got attacked if you unlocked the anomaly already. I personally just recommend the infra knife because it's so overpowered. It's insane. It's not even funny. It kills things in virtually like 2 seconds if you have it upgraded to its, to its full capacity or whatnot. I haven't tried the other starship weaponry because infra knife is so good, but if I were to give my personal recommendation, I would definitely say to go get that. There's one drawback with it though, unfortunately, is that when you use it, sometimes it'll actually spray and hit something that you don't actually want to. If you say, for example, you go and farm asteroids in space to get resources like silver, platinum, and gold, you'll actually end up, or tritium or whatever, you'll actually end up accidentally hitting some NPCs sometimes, and then you'll reduce your reputation, and you'll also get some sentinel aggro on you, which you do not want to have. Okay, so for tip number 4, I recommend to travel to as many planets as humanly possible and setting down a base computer with a label and description of whatever the resources that are available on that planet. It's incredibly useful. And if you don't know, if you set down a base computer, you don't actually need to set up a portal to warp to wherever else you need to go. You can actually use the base computer computer as a source, like a location to teleport to, but not from, and then use and save it for a later date. All right, so, and step number 5 is to buy and hoard every single thing that you could possibly imagine, especially in the early game. Buy as many things as you possibly can. Now, obviously, if you're in the early game, you're not going to have a lot of money, but even feces has a incredibly useful tool to making things like for plants and stuff like that, and lubricant and all these different ingredients that require different unique resources. The other thing that I want to say is that if and when you get yourself like more advanced, you'll be able to unlock these things called storage containers from the space anomaly. Now, I personally wouldn't recommend to unlock the ones that are base building ones, the ones that you can put on a planet themselves, because you can't access it from anywhere in the galaxy, as far as I know. I say as far as I know because I personally use get the storage modules through my Corvette and also for my freighter. So I never actually need to use the storage compartments that are located where I place them on an actual planet itself for a base. I just use my freighter and I can just summon my freighter anywhere, and it makes it extremely useful, and you don't actually need to manually go into a storage container in person. You can just summon your freighter to you, access your entire inventory through the tabs and everything, which is incredibly useful. This is like a little bit more advanced, but this is kind of like if I were to say the next most groundbreaking, really OP upgrade module for you to obtain is definitely to get the item teleportation module for your freighter or for your Corvette or your starship. It's called different things for each different thing, for each different mode of transportation through like the freighter, the Corvette, the starship, and so on and so forth. I think the Corvette and the starship are the exact same name, but I think the freighter is completely different name. So quote me if I'm wrong, but just letting you know it's an incredibly useful thing. So for tip number 6, I recommend is to use the No Man's Sky companion app on either the Google Play Store or the Apple Play Store. Definitely install this thing as soon as possible. It's incredibly useful. It could be very useful in the early game too as well, if you're really like savvy with understanding how and getting advanced into the game really soon as possible. It'll make your life a lot easier if you have like different materials on hand and you say, for example, you need, I don't know, silver or something, or chromatic metal, whatever the case might be. These are just like simple examples, but you can turn recipes or ingredients that you currently have into something that it's completely different than what you had beforehand. A really good example of this is in the early game, you can actually turn all those different rusted metals or tainted metals or the residual goo that you see from broken down machinery that's lying about as you've been exploring, and you can actually refine that a few times and turn that actually into nanites, and it's incredibly useful for early game. In the early game, you don't really have a whole lot of access to nanites unless you got really lucky and you somehow spawned on a curious deposit planet, but the odds of that happening are pretty rare, primarily based upon RNG, and you can't really rely on too much on RNG. Definitely very much get the No Man's Sky companion app. It's extremely useful. All right, for tip number 7, I recommend you go to a pirate station after you've done the previous tips and go and buy a bunch of different arms and tech containers, because these different containers that you can buy from the vendor that you can see on screen right about now will give you the ability to get a whole host of different upgrade modules that you can get. It could be completely anything. It's entirely RNG, but the ones that you want to primarily focus on is the scanner modules, and maybe even a starship weaponry, and maybe even some exosuit modules of any kind, because your character doesn't have anything. They have modules on there that have some like really insane stats on there, but the one that you want to focus on is getting the scanner modules installed as soon as possible. And the reason why is because if you can get one with a really high stat profile of like 10,000 of each, which by the way is like hitting the lottery, even I don't even have that, but if you have one that has like one for fauna, one for terrain, and then one for creatures, and then you have them increase rewards for them, it'll be scaled up by like X 1000% for each different category, plus maybe even scanning radius. You can actually make a hefty profit. You could even upgrade this in the future. You will actually be able to make like 300k by scanning creatures, terrain, and then some fauna. It's extremely useful for the early game because that's kind of how you're going to be making the vast majority of your income. At least that's kind of how I do things. Tip number 8, save your nanites, don't spend them. The only time you should ever be spending your nanites are for a handful of particular reasons, is to upgrade the current class of your current starship, whether or not that's a normal regular starship or it's a Corvette. You can also buy reactor cores from the starship vendor located also on a space station, on a regular one I should say. However, you can also spend them in other ways. Things like at the pirate station, like I mentioned in the previous points, you can buy direct upgrades from those vendors for nanites. It's completely RNG. Some of them will carry the modules that you want and some of them won't. Kind of like the primary reason for spending your nanites would be for the research and synthesis vendors that you can buy or you can go to that give you different decorations, that give you, upgrades for your exosuit, your multi-tool, your starship, and so on and so forth. It's going to be like where you spend most of your nanites, if at all. But these are the best ways to spend your nanites. Tip number 9, make good use of the restore save point feature. I played this game for over 100 hours and I've had a lot of instances where I really screwed the pooch in terms of what I need to do in my game. For instance, when I was hunting my current multi-tool, I traded in my previous one and lost all of my modules. Had I known about the restore save point feature, I could have probably reloaded my save point and then prevented such a thing. But because I got into my spaceship, which created a restore point before I did that, it prevented my ability to not lose everything like what I wanted to. Now, don't make the same mistake that I did. You can actually restore it. Don't get into your spaceship and fix an error that you might have made. This is incredibly useful for something like if you fall into a hole, start glitching out in outer space, or whatever the heck happens. But it's incredibly useful to make good use of this. It's kind of like the unstuck feature in most games that's found in most games. All right, tip number 10, instead of trying to fly straightforwardly in the atmosphere to whatever you need to go to, if something takes you 30 minutes to get to, which you'll notice what it says and how long it takes if you hover over it, instead of doing that, fly out of the atmosphere and then warp directly to it and fixate it to it. You'll fly way faster and immediately directly to it. This is a very big time-saving thing that was incredibly useful when I found out about it the first time around. A step onto that is that if you're traveling about and you're trying to explore and you're trying to look for something in particular, you can actually go into first-person mode. The default option actually is first-person mode, but located in the bottom left of the dashboard, you'll find some very useful data that is incredibly useful for you to do what you want to do. If you're looking for a particular location or a beacon, you can use the coordinates located on the bottom left of the dash that's situated in the X and Y coordinates. The X will be the first number and then the Y will be the second number. It doesn't unfortunately contain anything relating to Z. Also, this is incredibly useful if you want to track how fast your starship's moving. It's incredibly useful because if you are comparing different stats, you realize there's more maneuverability that you invest into your spaceship, whether or not that's a Corvette or it's a starship, a regular starship. You're gonna realize that the more maneuverability that you obtain, the more faster that number goes. Tip number 11, and I see a lot of people do this, especially when I watch a lot of other people play the game, is they don't sort their equipment for boosted adjacency bonuses. Now, there's different ways to optimize this. There's lots of different sources you can use if you know where to look. Online, you can find different pseudo planning things for multi-tool arrangement of stats and so on and so forth, and to get the best result. But if you make good use of these things, you can then get a lot of bang for your buck. For the starship, for instance, if you put your Infraknife module, the one that actually has the damage on the tooltip, and you put that onto the supercharged slot, it'll actually boost the damage of it by 20%, a flat bonus increase, and then you can put the upgrade module surrounding it. And if you're really lucky, you might even have some supercharged slots in a clump sum all right next to each other, further enhancing whatever the modules you decide to put there, which is incredibly useful because not only are you making good use of multiple supercharged slots in the same area, but you're able to multiply it through the adjacency bonuses of them being right next to each other, which is incredibly insane. It's probably one of my favorite things in this game that I found in over 100 hours of playing this game. However, though, I will say that whenever you are crafting your Corvette for the first time, don't get too lost in the idea that you can keep spam increasing your maneuverability so that you can make a really fast Corvette ship. It's generally speaking not recommended to go past 2000 maneuverability, and even if you are able to do that, props to you, but it's incredibly difficult to do, but it's a very low return on investment if you go past 2k, so just don't go crazy. As far as the starship shield stats go, don't really lose sleep over too much about it. As long as you have like 320 or 360, ranging from anywhere in that kind of ballpark, you won't ever die as long as you have a really strong weapon, kill anything that you see without dying. One of the things I like to live by is a good defense is a good offense, and they can't kill you if they're already dead. As far as the warp drive range, I don't personally pay attention to it whatsoever, mainly because if you ever end up getting a freighter, your freighter can travel like 10x the range as your Corvette will ever be able to do. It's just generally speaking a much more smarter idea to divert your attention for warp drive range with your freighter, considering that you can't fight with your freighter, warp nearly infinite range with it. Tip number 13, do not waste your first encounter with a freighter on something with low stats and something that you're going to look to replace in the future. For those of you that don't know, you can only have one freighter, and your first encounter with one is actually given to you for free, or that you can claim it for free. Anything after that will cost you money, and they actually cost quite a bit of money. I strongly encourage you to be wise about which one that you want to choose because you can only do it once per save. You have two options in front of you of what you can do. You can either inform yourself of all the different designs. You can find a lot of YouTube videos and images and different websites that show you all the different designs that you can choose from. There's two different main categories of freighters that you can get. One are like standard / merchant freighters, and the others are the capital freighters. The capital freighters are far and more massive than like the merchant and slash standard freighters that you can get. If you get a capital freighter and you get an S tier one, and I say if you get one, because you have a choice that you can decide. You can either save scum to get it. It is generally speaking kind of controversial. 50% in my experience have said that it's like they hate people who do that and they don't like it themselves, and the other people just say they don't simply care. I personally just on the side of personally not giving a because I really like how cool it is to have an S tier one, and I want to have fun with the game. I don't really want to bound myself to too many rules. If I really wanted to do something like that, I'd probably play like a hardcore version or permadeath mode, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm just looking to have fun on this game because it's an incredible experience, and there's not really a sense in my opinion, stressing yourself out on making the game feel a certain type of way or more difficult than it really needs to be. You want to choose your first freighter wisely and definitely get it as soon as you possibly can. This is something that's more later in the game kind of oriented. You don't have to get it like immediately, but it's incredibly useful, especially in the early game. You'll feel like extremely overpowered. There is a teleport module for items that you can install. It's going to take you a long time to farm up the materials to get it, but once you get it, it makes it so that whenever you summon your freighter to you in any kind of a galaxy, mind you, if you have enough warp drive range to warp to wherever you are, it'll allow you to use and access your materials if your freighter's in the same system. It's incredibly useful. Tip number 14, gather nanites the right way. Now, in my opinion, what I personally do, I go to dissonant planets with the exocraft mining laser and then use my refiner on my exocraft to refine radiant shards into nanites and just go around shooting on top of my exocraft the different radiant shards that you can get. These are only located on dissonant planets, but they're incredibly overpowered in terms of being able to get a lot of nanites. If you want a couple of hours just watching a YouTube video on the side or something like that, getting a lot of nanites. Or number two, which I recommend, but I less recommend, the reason being is because it takes a long time for these things to refine. But if you can find a planet with curious deposits, they will grant you a lot of something called runaway mold, and this runaway mold, if you put it into a refiner, will give you a lot of nanites. You can even make this even better if you have boosted stats on your mining laser to get you a lot of them. I've seen upwards of like 9,000 from installing all the different upgrade modules for your mining laser and then mining the curious deposits. It's actually insane. Now, the third type of way to collect nanites that I strongly recommend, and most people don't know about this because it's not really introduced to you at any point in the story of the game. You just kind of have to explore the menus and then you'll figure out on your own. But the more times that you spend time exploring and scanning things and then, you know, doing different things, just interacting with the environment, exploring and scanning, you'll be able to go to this tab that you'll see right on screen now, where you can click this button and it'll give you a absolute like stupid amount of nanites. Now, I personally haven't done it in a very long time. I think I scanned like probably like 10 or 12 different planets from the last time that I did it. And as you can see right on the screen now, you can see 3,600 nanites were given to me. It's extremely overpowered. It's insane. It's actually insane. The fourth way to gain a lot of nanites, I mentioned this in a point previously, is to actually sell the unwanted and unopened pirate upgrade modules that you spent on the arms and tech containers from, I think it was like 0.3. They sell for an absolute stupid amount, especially if you get like 10 of cyclotron. You can actually sell them for like 2,000 nanites, which is actually insane. Now, there's other ways to get nanites. They're not actually all that good, and I personally wouldn't recommend them considering that, you know, I just don't do them all the time and I have way more than enough nanites by doing my current methods. Is you can actually make good use of the tainted metal and sticky residue from broken machinery lying about. If you have been playing this game for a decent amount of time, you might have realized that there's a lot of different machineries that could, like, have a bunch of goos, tainted metals, that kind of thing. If you actually take that material and you refine it a few times, you can actually turn it into nanites. Now, don't go crazy with this because you're not going to get a whole lot of them, but you'll get a decent amount of nanites. It's definitely something that's really OP in the early game if you know, but it's not something that's gonna, like, you know, make you incredibly rich with nanites or flooding with nanites. Now, there's other ways you can get nanites too as well, but I personally don't recommend doing these ones, especially if you're like a really new player and you don't have a whole lot of upgrade modules to your name, is the abandoned structures or abandoned buildings that you can encounter out in the world. Now, when you go to these buildings, you can actually get into contact with these weird eggs that you can see on screen right about now. And if you go and interact with the eggs and you press, for me on PC, because it's called E it's the keybind is E, but for console it's probably like X or square or what have you. You can actually take these the eggs, the Laval eggs or whatever they're called, and you can refine those into nanites. I can't remember the name of what they're called because I don't actually use them anymore. I used to use them in the early game, but they're just not that good compared to like what I'm currently doing. And you get way more than enough if you have a lot of money and you're scanning things with this cycle of, you know, having a really good scanner that gives you a lot of money every time you scan things, and then going and buying the arms tech and then selling those unwanted, unopened packages for upgrade modules to the direct vendor or any kind of vendor. You'll get a shit ton of nanites, and then you'll have more money that you need to do with. You'll never actually ever need to go and do these things. So I just strongly recommend that you just scan things, buy the arms and tech modules, and then sell them for nanites, the unwanted ones. In the event that you do actually want to use the upgrade modules, just go and scan some more things, because there's nearly infinite amount of planets. You'll just have so much more money that you can ever possibly need to do with it or to spend. So there's really no point in, you know, going to any kind of abandoned structure buildings. Some people swear by it, but I personally think it's a really bad strategy. Tip number 15, do not waste your time on difficult planets. Now, I had to learn this kind of like the hard way, and I still have to deal with it considering I made some poor decisions in my, you know, really early part of the game. Do not waste your time on difficult planets. And what I mean by that is that any planet that has high sentinel activity or it has really aggressive storms, unless you're farming like storm crystals, there's no real reason as to why you should ever be spending your time on a planet that's got like a lot of stormy weather and or has like a lot of sentinel activity. It's kind of pointless. I made the mistake in building one of my bases on a high sentinel activity thing that I use all the time, and it just makes things way more difficult than it needs to be. There's always a planet that has what you need and doesn't have any of what you would be struggling to do with, basically. But as I said before, there are certain materials that can only be found from, you know, these types of planets where they're difficult, and that is activated stellar metals or storm crystals, that kind of a thing. Those are unique, and maybe in those kind of unique circumstances, you should definitely set up a base computer just to go and farm them. Just be prepared that you're gonna have to, like, you know, bundle up for those particular planets, for lack of a better word. But in general, just kind of avoid those planets. You don't really need to ever be spending time on those things unless, of course, you're farming storm crystals and looking for activated materials, stellar metals. Tip number 16, get started on settlements as soon as possible and do them when you can, so you can get a steady supply of miscellaneous items that you may need in your adventure. Now, I'm telling you this right now because as soon as you go to any kind of a space station, you can actually make good use of settlements. You can actually have a settlement immediately. It's not necessarily a spoiler. As long as you went to the cartographer at any point in time at any space station, you should have been able to see that you can buy a settlement chart from him. It should be on like page 2 or something like that. Might have been on the first page, whatever, doesn't really matter. But when you buy the settlement charts and then you use them on a planet, whatever you use it on the planet will have that settlement. So if you're really wanting to have a settlement, which I recommend and get started on them as soon as possible, use them on a paradise planet. Use them on a planet that has no storms, that has no aggressive sentinel activity or any kind of sentinel activity whatsoever. If it can't be helped and you don't have access to a planet that has that kind of a thing, then I guess it can't be helped, and then you can just make a settlement there. But I strongly discourage you from doing that, because you're gonna have a tough time dealing with trying to upgrade your settlement when doing it. And the reason why settlements are really good is because once you start actually making a profit on them, you can choose between two slots of reoccurring and generated items. Like, for instance, for me, as you can see right on screen right now, I have these two materials working for me every time I log in. I just log in and I immediately get these gases and glass on my settlements, and it's really overpowered considering that fact that I don't have to go through the effort of obtaining those materials at all. Tip number 17, make good use of the community portals instead of manually traveling between different countless systems. Some community destinations are located on very unique planets that offer very dense and valuable rewards. Some of them are located on paradise planets that are basically very impossible to find, and you wouldn't have otherwise found if you didn't have the community feature enabled or multiplayer enabled. It also gives you something else to do too as well, because some of the builds that people make on community bases are actually insane. If you go to the anomaly, you should be able to see a lot of the community bases that are kind of highlighted for that kind of period of time, and I definitely would recommend exploring there. All right, that'll do it for the video. Thank you guys for tuning into the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.